that really inspired thinking about the way that Ray Alf brought storytelling into so much of what he did, and really having this concept of moments of time. And my moment of time at the museum has spent a lot of it, I've spent a lot of that focused on one particular kind of dinosaur, the horned dinosaurs, or ceratopsians. The photo that you see here was taken just a little over a year ago at a place called Dinosaur Park. It's a concrete sculpture garden on a hill overlooking Rapid City, South Dakota. This is the place where I first discovered dinosaurs, first fell in love with them, and it's a place that I continue to go back to over and over again, just because it's been such a neat and influential place on my life. So just as an overview, and this will be about a half-hour presentation or so, I'm going to start first talking about what horned dinosaurs are, and then address a little bit about sort of my story discovering them as a scientist. Then I want to focus on two research projects that I've been involved in. The first is a collaborative project where we were looking at the potential of things like Triceratops in places where we didn't necessarily think they existed. And then the final thing, I'll be talking about some current research that's ongoing with Webb students, volunteers, and others, beginning with our Peccary Trip last summer. Okay, so first off, well, what are horned dinosaurs? Why are we excited about them? For me as a paleontologist, you know, these are one of the most iconic dinosaurs out there. We've known about them, you know, for over 150 years. Here's a very well-known painting, at least for paleo nerds, of Triceratops, painted back at the end of the 19th century by Charles R. Knight, a well-known wildlife artist and paleontological illustrator. And this dinosaur and its relatives have in many ways set our idea of what a dinosaur is and what it looks like. Putting them within the context of the dinosaur family tree, Triceratops and its cousins and its relatives belong to a group called ornithischians. And ornithischians are the group of mostly plant-eating dinosaurs that includes duck-billed dinosaurs, stegosaurs, and all those other things. That contrasts with saurischians, which is where you get T-Rex and your sauropods and all of those things. So we're going to be talking just about the ceratopsians, or the horned dinosaurs, which are on the ornithischian part of the dinosaur family tree. Okay, so ceratopsians, even though the name means horned face, the earliest ones did not have any horns on their faces at all. This is one of the oldest ones known, an animal called yinlong, which is found in China from rocks around 160 million years old. It did not have horns. It didn't have the big bony frill over the neck that we think of with horned dinosaurs, but it did have some details of the skull that identify it as a horned dinosaur or as a cousin of Triceratops, the structure of the beak, some of the structures in the teeth, and other things. We have later ones like Psittacosaurus, which again was a hornless horned dinosaur. And then later on we get to things that start to look a little bit more like miniature Triceratops. This is Protoceratops, found in China and Mongolia. For those of you that have been to Mongolia, you probably saw some fossils of these either in the ground or at the museum. And this is a relatively close relative of Triceratops, just not having those horns on the face. But the animals that I'm going to focus on for the rest of the talk are the true horned dinosaurs, or the ceratopsids. That's animals like Centrosaurus, Styracosaurus, Chasmosaurus, and all those other ones. They lived only in North America and parts of Asia from around 85 million years ago up to the end of the age of dinosaurs, around 66 million years ago. So at the end of the Cretaceous. So why are horned dinosaurs cool? Why am I so interested in them? Well, you know, when I was a kid, you know, I knew about all the dinosaurs, you know, the sauropods like Apatosaurus and Brachiosaurus and things like Stegosaurus. And T-Rex was always kind of interesting to me. But I felt even at the time, back in the 90s, you know, kind of as Jurassic Park was taking off, that maybe Tyrannosaurs were getting just a little too much attention. And I wanted to learn more about dinosaurs that were other parts of the family tree. So for me, one of the big appeals of horned dinosaurs is that they aren't T-Rex. You know, it's something just a little bit different, a little bit out of the ordinary. I guess I'm sort of a hipster that way. You know, I liked ceratopsians before they went mainstream. also, you know, seriously, like T-Rex, you know, all the T-Rex kind of look the same. You know, they got big heads, they got big teeth, they got tiny arms. Whether they're juveniles or adults, you know, there's not a lot going on with them. But for our horned dinosaurs, especially the ceratopsids, there's so much variety in them. If you look at a Tyrannosaur skull, every Tyrannosaur skull basically looks the same. With our horned dinosaurs, they did some incredible things through evolution with the shapes of their horns, the shapes of their frills. Every species has a drastically different skull. And this is really cool for me as a scientist. First, because I think they're just fun to look at. But second, with this rapid evolution of so many different species, so many different shapes of skulls, and so many associated behaviors that presumably went with it, it makes ceratopsians, these horned dinosaurs, really great toolboxes or really great sandboxes to study dinosaur evolution, to study the way that these skulls functioned. There's just a lot of really cool scientific questions that we can ask about them. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on our horned dinosaurs. Now I want to talk a little bit about how I got to be a paleontologist and how I got interested in horned dinosaurs. So we're going to start off with a little bit of a slideshow. All right, so you know, buckle up, everyone. We're going to go up to South Dakota. This is the farm where I was raised, where I grew up. It's outside a town called Armour. It's in southeastern South Dakota. The town itself has today just a little over 600 people. And I grew up as a farm kid. You know, some of my early memories are being out in the fields with my dad. Here's me at probably, you know, just over a year old, where it looks like we're in probably a oat field after that was harvested. And you know, when I was really little, first couple of years, I was really interested in farm equipment and farm animals and all that. But that changed when I was 4 years old, and we went on a family vacation out to western South Dakota, to that place called Dinosaur Park that I talked about. Now, Dinosaur Park is really cool because it has all these giant life-sized sculptures of the dinosaurs that lived in that part of South Dakota. Animals like T-Rex, animals like Stegosaurus, and that animal Triceratops that I talked a little bit about. While I was there, I remember thinking these things are so cool. My parents bought a pack of plastic dinosaurs at the gift shop there. You know, I just played with them after that. And so you can see, there I am with the green John Deere hat at the right there. And I'm just smiling like crazy because I was just thinking dinosaurs were the coolest things ever. So as I got a little bit older, of course, you know, I had all my plastic dinosaur toys. Here I am at about 6 years old. You can see my first ceratopsids down there in the lower right. And, you know, I was really interested in dinosaurs. I read everything I could about them. I, you know, watched whatever documentaries came on TV. And then as I got a little bit older, and I discovered that, oh, there's, you know, some of these books talk about things we don't know about dinosaurs. And I began to think like, well, what don't we know about the horned dinosaurs like Triceratops? And so I started writing letters to scientists. I didn't know any better, you know, that maybe that was kind of a strange thing to do for a kid that's 10 or 11 or 12 years old, but I wrote lots of letters to scientists, some of the people that wrote the books, people that were mentioned in the books. Some of them wrote back, some of them didn't, but I remember the, you know, the letter that really set me on the path towards studying horned dinosaurs was this one right here. So I would have been between the summer of my 7th and 8th grade year, and I'd written to John Ostrom, who is a very well-known research paleontologist. He was instrumental in sort of changing our view of dinosaurs. I knew him as a famous paleontologist, and I thought, oh, maybe he can, you know, answer some of my questions. So I was really interested in how you tell the different species of Triceratops apart, and if maybe it was possible to tell male and female Triceratops apart. And he wrote me a really nice letter, and you know, he enclosed with it a scientific publication of his. And that was one of the first scientific publications I had gotten my hands on. And that really changed my life because I read through it and I thought, oh, wow, there's, you know, so much more than what we see in the books, and there's so many things that you know, there's still to be known. And I got really interested in this question of how many species of Triceratops there were. I wrote to some of the museums in western South Dakota, and they agreed that I could stop by and take a look at some of their fossils. Here I am. I think I was probably an 8th grader in this picture. They let me take measurements of the skulls. I wrote to other museums and asked if they could send me publications or send me measurements. And I put all that together into what became my science fair project for my 8th grade and 9th grade year. Of course, I was, quite a little nerd, but I'm quite proud of that. And that led on to participation in science fair, being able to work as an independent researcher, just through writing to scientists, being in contact with them, and a lot of support from some really generous people that, sent me that information and answered those letters and sent me some of those publications. So after I finished up in high school, I really wanted to continue my career in paleontology, in particular, continue to study horned dinosaurs. So I went to South Dakota School of Mines out in Rapid City, just down the hill from where the dinosaur park was. We, of course, had lots of great field trips. Here I am as a college student out at the Grand Canyon. And I also had an opportunity to continue to publish or to work on field work there and even start to study some more horned dinosaurs. And that then led me on to grad school, where I went out to Stony Brook University, and I actually got to do my PhD on horned dinosaurs and horned mammals. And it turned out that my PhD advisor was Kathy Forster. There she is, Dr. Kathy Forster, who was one of the scientists that I had first written to when I was about 13 or 14 years old. So how amazing was it that, barely 10 years later, I was getting my PhD with one of those scientists I first met. So that was a really, that was kind of my launching pad into a professional career as a ceratopsian paleontologist. And from there, of course, right after grad school, I came out to the ALF Museum, and I've been here now for over 12 years. It's just been a fantastic time at ALF and at Webb. Now, as all as part of that, I've been really privileged to have a wonderful group of colleagues to work on some amazing discoveries during my time here at the ALF. Not just the colleagues here on campus, but also colleagues off campus. As an example of something I was able to help out with, I was one of the junior collaborators for a paper naming this animal called Nasutoceratops titusii. Nasutoceratops lived around 75 million years ago in what's now southern Utah, within Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. And it was really fun to participate in naming a dinosaur. But I think, about a year ago, I found out that this thing actually made the leap into pop culture and is now available as action figures and has even been incorporated into the Jurassic Park franchise. So Jurassic Park, this movie that I remember watching, when I was a kid, and it being very inspirational for me, it was kind of coming full circle to be able to see some of the work that I helped with influencing, this really important pop cultural phenomenon. Another fun horned dinosaur project was naming the oldest horned dinosaur known from North America, this animal called Aquilops. It was from a skull around 110 million years old from southern Montana. And I worked on it with colleagues from Oklahoma and from here in California. We named this new animal, and it sort of took off. I know one person who had it tattooed on their arm, which is kind of neat. I've never, worked on a project that inspired people to get tattoos, but that's great. And then I was surprised shortly after we published it that it actually made an appearance on TV in the DC Legends of Tomorrow show. Got a mention, I guess, in a couple different episodes. I've not watched them, but I'm just like, okay, someone like outside of the science community finds this stuff interesting. So it's always fun to see, how the science sometimes connects up with the pop culture. So hopefully by this point, I've convinced you at least a little bit, or maybe got you considering the fact that horned dinosaurs are pretty awesome. They're cool. They have cool skulls. They have a pop cultural influence. And now I want to talk about some maybe a little more obscure work, but I still think work that's pretty awesome. So to get started on that, I want to talk about first the part of the geological time scale that we're going to be talking about. So those of you that have been to the museum, Ray Alf's time spiral, and we're going to look at just a little chunk of the Mesozoic on that time spiral, maybe just an inch or two on there. The last 20 million years of the Cretaceous period, what's shown in green here. And the horned dinosaurs that we know The ceratopsids, animals like Triceratops and that, really only existed in their best form with all the horns and all the frills during the from around 85 or 90 million years ago up until 66 million years ago. And they had some pretty major evolutionary changes along the way. So if we start off with our sort of the early forms, we have animals like Centrosaurus and that living around 75 million years ago, next to early ancestors of Tyrannosaurus, kind of small animals. They got bigger, of course, as you get into the Hell Creek Formation at the very end of the age of dinosaurs. And then, of course, sadly, they all went extinct around 66 million years ago with an asteroid impact and all that. And then, of course, that cleared the way for those little mammals and other things that people like Dr. Lofgren study. So that's putting us a little bit into context of where we're going to be looking and where we're going to be, when we're going to be talking about. Okay, so at this time in the Mesozoic, at the end of the Cretaceous period, North America looked really different. It was split in two by a seaway so that you could basically swim from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. That divided our continent into two. So we had an eastern landmass called Appalachia and a western landmass called Laramidia. And the dinosaurs that, if you think about late Cretaceous dinosaurs, things like T-Rex and Triceratops and Edmontosaurus and all those are dinosaurs that are living just on Laramidia. That's where those classic Cretaceous dinosaurs were. The dinosaurs out in Appalachia, they were sort of, in many ways, their own evolutionary branches and are not as well known. Here is a little bit of a closer up view at that. But one of the things that I've been interested in is, why, how come we don't have such great fossils of animals like Triceratops, or really any fossils out on the eastern part of the US? Now, if we plot the occurrences of horned dinosaurs, ceratopsids like Triceratops, on a map, there's a lot of them in that western half of North America. Remember that landmass called Laramidia. Lots and lots and lots of fossils, and there's lots of rocks out there. Notice there's none in eastern North America. And we still see that when we look at all the dinosaurs from the late Cretaceous, the fossil record for eastern North America still isn't that great. Some of that is there's just not a lot of rocks exposed to the right age. In some cases, it's because a good chunk of, the coast is paved over. But a lot of it is just, we don't have a lot of rocks of the right age that are exposed. There's too many trees and stuff out east. And as scientists have studied these kinds of dinosaurs, as I mentioned, they've noted that they're unlike the ones that we find in Western North America. And the reason for that is that the split between Western and Eastern North America dates back probably to at least 100 million years ago. And this was before the true tyrannosaurs, before the true horned dinosaurs like Triceratops really made their appearance. So there was not even a chance, as far as we know, for them to make it from west out to east. So they were just stuck on that western half of North America, living a very lonely lifestyle on that strip of land. And so the dinosaurs out east, they were doing their own thing. No T-Rex, no Triceratops, as far as we know. So out west, Triceratops, out east, none of that. But that changed in sort of an unusual way. So I think social media is a bit of a mixed bag at times. Those of you that might participate in it, it has its ups and its downs. But one of the things that I really enjoy about it, one thing that I think is a real positive, is this thing that a lot of scientists and fossil fans do called Fossil Friday. So you get to the end of the week, you look for a cool fossil in your museum collection or maybe your personal collection, you post a photo of it. And back in 2016, George Phillips, who is the paleontologist in Mississippi, works at the Natural History Museum there, and knows a lot about the fossils of that area, he posted a picture of this strange dinosaur tooth that he had found in rocks that typically yield marine animals. And he wasn't quite sure what it was. I didn't know George at the time, but a friend of mine reposted it and I saw it. And I got excited almost immediately. But I mean, I always get excited about dinosaur fossils, but this was a really special dinosaur fossil. Even though it was just a single tooth, it carried a whole bunch of information. And what I noted as I was looking at that tooth, is that it had a really sort of a split in the base of it. And that split is something that's characteristic of horned dinosaurs like Triceratops. So here's a picture of a Triceratops skull. If we were to slice that jaw in half, what you see on the left side of the screen there, that's the inside view of the teeth. Just like alligators and sharks, Triceratops and a lot of other dinosaurs had kind of a conveyor belt of teeth. As one tooth got worn out, it got replaced. And Triceratops and the true horned dinosaurs, or ceratopsids, are very distinctive among dinosaurs in that they have a split tooth root. So one tooth kind of slots inside the next tooth. And that's found only in the ceratopsids. That's the only kind of dinosaur where it's found. So if you find a split-rooted tooth, you know that you have a ceratopsid. And so that tooth from Mississippi had a split root on it. You can see it there on that top row of images in the upper left and in the upper right. And that was a little bit interesting to me for the reason that we shouldn't have animals with split-rooted teeth like Triceratops out on that eastern half of North America. I thought as a scientist, like, sorry, they just don't live out that way. So what was this doing there? I got in touch with George as soon as I saw that Facebook post. I didn't know him at all, but I'm like, immediately, like 2 seconds later, I send him an email. I'm like, holy cow, you have what looks like a ceratopsid tooth or something like Triceratops. They shouldn't be in Mississippi. This is so cool. Does this change everything we thought we knew? So we agreed to a research collaboration. He sent the fossil out here for me to borrow at the museum. And he provided all of his expertise and as a collaborator on this project. And so the fossil came out of what's called a locality called the Owl Creek Formation. That's rocks from the very end of the Cretaceous period. So around 68, 69 to 66 million years ago. And and remember that this area in Mississippi, where it is coming from, where this fossil is coming from, is going to be probably along that Seaway in that eastern half of North America. It's an area that's pretty well known by local amateur collectors. It has lots of fossils that are found there, typically things that are marine animals, so shark teeth, fossil snails, those kinds of things. And those were all found alongside this dinosaur tooth. So the snails, ammonites, fossil turtle shell, shark teeth, and those all helped to figure out the age and the environment where this thing was found. And so, using George's geological know-how, we were able to narrow down where it came from within geological time. So we knew it was probably around 69 to 66 million years old. And what that did was it helped us to really revise what we thought we knew about the map of North America at that time. So there's been a little bit of a debate around how long that seaway that went up the interior of North America stuck around. Was it gone before the end of the age of dinosaurs? Was it did it stick around a little bit later? Who knows? But this Triceratops-like tooth that we found suggests that probably in the last million years or two of the Cretaceous, that seaway had retreated to the point where animals like Triceratops were able to get into eastern North America. And so this was just like that lonely lost Triceratops that had wandered out east as soon as it saw that land available and left some of its teeth in what's now Mississippi. So that paper was published back in 2017. It's available online. In fact, you can even download the tooth, a digital file of the tooth. And if you have a 3D printer, you can make your own Mississippi Ceratopsian tooth. So that is that project. And that was a really fun one. And as a researcher, as a scientist, I'm always looking for new places to find new horned dinosaur fossils and other kinds of dinosaurs, if you get that bycatch along with it. And one of the things I also want to do is be able to take students along to share in that experience. And so if you want to find horned dinosaurs, you got to look for rocks that are the right age in the right location. And Wyoming is a place where We've known about horned dinosaurs basically since their very discovery. Some of the first fossils of Triceratops were found there back in the 1870s and 1880s, and there have been Triceratops and other things found up to this day. However, the rocks that are a little bit older, from around 80 to 75 million years ago, aren't as well known, and so they're a really great research opportunity. The name of the rocks that I'm interested in studying are called the Mesa Verde Formation. They're exposed throughout the state of Wyoming. And they range from probably around 80 to 75 million years old, give or take a few million years. We don't actually know the age that precisely. And I was, of course, interested in finding a place where, paleontologists hadn't really looked before. So I started looking at geological maps, and I settled on an area called Oregon Basin. This is up near Cody, Wyoming. It's an area that has a very significant oil field. It's been well mapped geologically, and it has a nice set of rocks from just the right ages to find horned dinosaurs. And some things that got me further excited about it was it's a ways away from other areas where the fossils have been found, so it's some potential to make some cool scientific discoveries. And even better, as I got looking through the literature and talking with researchers and scientists in Wyoming and who have done field work in Wyoming, this looked like an area where there had been virtually no field work done previously. In fact, the last and only mention of fossils I could find in the geological literature was back in the 1920s. And this was work done by a geologist for the US Geological Survey named D.F. Hewitt. He mapped that area. He noted that there were some dinosaur bone fragments in some areas. And that's about all we knew. Just as an interesting web connection, Pat Muffler, who's an alum of Webb and is on our museum board, actually met Hewitt back towards the end of Hewitt's life, which would have been, and during Patrick's early time at the US Geological Survey. So that was kind of a neat connection. And it turns out that Hewitt also had some interactions with Ray Elf over the years through various projects. So it was kind of neat to know that, I was following in the footsteps of someone that at least interacted with Ray Elf and with some Webb alumni. But that's all a long way of saying that, if nobody's done fossil work there in nearly 100 years, that's a great potential to find some fossils. So back last summer on our summer Peccary trip, we loaded up the students into the Peccary vehicles and we went up to Wyoming and started looking for fossils. The first little bit, of course, we didn't have a lot of great luck with it. We here the students are really fascinated by the little horned lizard that they had found. But eventually, with a little bit of persistence, we did start finding pieces of dinosaur bone, and then finding, even identifiable dinosaur bones. So here's Rebecca, one of the recent VWS alums, with a dinosaur vertebra, one of the first dinosaur bones found from that area. Here's Logan with a Tyrannosaur tooth, the first Tyrannosaur tooth ever found in that area. Kevin Quick, one of our science faculty, with a dinosaur bone he found weathering out of the rock. So we started finding some really cool stuff. That's got us pretty excited. And on our last real day of field work, we found a site that had lots of tiny fossils, microfossils weathering out. Here we are, and we're getting ready to scoop up some samples of the gravel to bring it back to the museum. So we loaded all that back, had the students help carry it, get that all together and carry it out. And then when I got back to the museum, we ran it through some screen to let the clay and the sand and all the fine sediment wash away. And then we're able to, start to find those little fossils in there. In the lower right, you can hopefully see a little dinosaur tooth there in the gravel. It's a tooth maybe around 2 or 3 millimeters long. Of course, I had some assistance with that, not just the Webb students, but my #1 fossil assistant, Sam. He's our oldest, and he, of course, loved looking through sort of the coarse fraction to find bits and pieces of dinosaur bone and turtle shell. So just quickly, as we looked under a microscope, we found a whole bunch of other different teeth, and this is a project that I'm working on with some of our Webb students in the Advanced Studies program. There's fish teeth, there are shark teeth and shark-like animals along with them, mammal teeth, everyone loves their mammals, crocodilian bits and pieces, turtles, because there's always turtles if you're in the Cretaceous, duck-billed dinosaurs, carnivorous dinosaurs, relatives of Velociraptor, the first known occurrence of an animal called Ricardoestesia gilmori in Wyoming. And unfortunately, I was really hoping for a horned dinosaur fossil, but we didn't find one. So if all works out well, we weren't able to go out this summer for some reason, but if it's we're able to go next summer, I really want to go out and look for more fossils and maybe find that horned dinosaur, because I know it has to be there. The rocks we're looking in are a really interesting time for horned dinosaur evolution. They're around 75 to 80 million years old, probably on the older end of that, which is a time where we just don't know a lot about what horned dinosaurs were doing then, especially in sort of that part area around Wyoming. We have some okay fossils up in Alberta and northern Montana, some fossils down in Utah, but that in-between zone, there's virtually nothing known. And so these fossils from these rocks from Wyoming, where we're looking, have some really nice potential, I think, to find some cool horned dinosaurs. All right, so that's a little bit of my story. I've been so lucky over the course of my career to go from, being a kid that was, really, just fascinated by dinosaurs, to being able to actually do research on them. Having the joy and the privilege to name dinosaurs, and see some of those names make it out into the wild, into pop culture, being able to make discoveries, and now, of course, being able to share those discoveries with you and be able to take part in them with some of our students here at Webb and at the Elf Museum. So hopefully, I've helped you, understand a little bit more about these incredibly fascinating animals. I think horned dinosaurs like Triceratops and their relatives just provide such a fascinating example of what our ancient life was like. I, of course, have that deep personal connection with a long childhood fascination, but I think the scientific side is just as interesting. Who would have thought, that we could find evidence of Triceratops-like things out in Mississippi where they weren't supposed to be, and that really changed and what we thought about the map of North America at that time. Who would have thought that, maybe there's some fossils out there in still unexplored parts of Wyoming. And so I'm really excited to see what the future brings. And with that, I want to thank all of you for being here, and thank, of course, everyone, who's participated in this work, our Webb students, our Webb alums, all of our volunteers and donors. This really couldn't happen without you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Gabe. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much. I absolutely need to get copies of all those photos of you as a child, just so that we can hang them up in the museum. Okay, so we are now moving on to the Q&A. So this is open to anybody who would like to ask Andy a question, any question at all. You can even ask him some questions about those precious childhood photos. Please use the Q&A function. That should be located about right here in your menu, if I am thinking about this correctly. Tap that button and you're able to ask a question, type it in the Q&A. All right. So we already have one question up, Andy. This one's from Randy Davies, who's asking, some of these dinosaurs have skulls that resemble beaks. Is it possible that these are the ones that evolved into birds?
All right, that's a fantastic question. And the beak of animals like Triceratops, really it is very bird-like. And in fact, the animal Psittacosaurus, if you remember one of those early horned dinosaurs, the name Psittacosaurus actually means parrot lizard, because the skull just looks so parrot-like and the beak is very parrot-like. But it turns out that that's an independent evolution. So that beak in horned dinosaurs that they got it all on their own. We know from other fossils that birds today are far more closely related to animals like Velociraptor and some of those carnivorous dinosaurs. So yeah, great question.
Let's see. This one is from Dwight Morgan, who is actually saying, who'd have thought that Facebook was a scientific tool?
Yes.
I think he's referring to your really cool find on our Fossil Friday post.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's been something that I'm always interested in how we can use some of these new ways of connecting to connect up with other researchers, and I think it's a great example of how something like that. It brings people together that maybe wouldn't have interacted. I never would have known about this fossil. I never would have met George as a collaborator without seeing that. And I think that's, there's days where I really just want to like throw my, in fact, I've uninstalled Facebook from my phone and all that stuff, but I still log on my laptop because there are those little glimmers of useful things on there for me. And yeah, so it's a tool like any other, and it's been really neat to use it, in some positive ways.
Definitely. And for all of you who are watching at home, the ALF Museum is very, very active on our social medias. So please find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we even do a live show just like this every Friday called Fossil Friday Chats with different paleontologists from throughout the world. So please check it out and follow us on social media. Okay, next question. This one's from Carol Jordan. Hi, Carol. Regarding the North American continent being split, approximately how many million years do you think that went on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so North America was split off and on, through the Mesozoic, but that last major split was around the last 40 to 50 million years of the Cretaceous. That was a long time to have those two continents separate, or two halves of the continent separated.
Cool. Let's see. This one's from Jim Hall. How many more ceratopsids have been found in the Owl Creek?
Oh, the one we have right now, that Owl Creek being those Mississippi horned dinosaurs, that's the only horned dinosaur, the only ceratopsid that's known there. And it's, just boggles my mind, that it was even found. Like, it was in some mud in a stream bed. Like the chance that George would have seen it at the time when he picked it up, like it's really like what a great bit of serendipity. But that's the only one we know of so far. And George has looked out there for a long time. He's looked at a lot of dinosaurs, and is well connected with the amateur fossil collecting community out there. There's other dinosaur bits and pieces, but nothing that's definitely ceratopsid. So this is pretty cool.
I still remember the day that happened. It was such a fun day. Let's see. This one is from Sebastian Hazlitt. What can you learn about a dinosaur from fossil pieces, bones, coprolites, whatever that you dig up?
Oh, cool. That's a great question. Yeah, so every fossil, that we find with a dinosaur or that is related to a dinosaur, gives us a little bit of information. So coprolites, fossil feces, that'll help us with diet. Skin, that'll tell us a little bit about their appearance. Even things like tooth marks on bones can be really, really informative. It's, every bit of data, helps us put together that extinct world.
This one comes from Mary Kenny. What is the purpose of the frill?
All right, the purpose of the frill. Heck if I know. And seriously, like it's one of those areas that still has a lot of discussion. I think, and I think the consensus scientifically is that it had a major part, at least in animals like Triceratops, with display, showing off. Maybe. Helping to recognize who is an appropriate mate, maybe to show the age of the animal, maybe to, had a small defensive function. But yeah, it seems like at least some sort of display purpose, showing off was a big part of it.
Let's see, this one's from Danielle Gordon. Actually, Malcolm Gordon wants to know, what are your favorite dinosaur books for young kids?
Oh, all of them. That one I'd have to think and get back to you because, even though I have my own small kids at home, we kind of rotate through, whatever. They don't actually read that many dinosaur books. They spend a lot of time in the museum, but not many dinosaur books. I guess I'm falling down on the job. But there are some nice ones out there. There's actually a great book that was just done recently by Ashley Hall. I'm trying to remember the name of it. For those of you that have been around the museum, for a number of years, Ashley used to work at the ALF as a part-time collections assistant, and she just published a book a couple weeks ago that's available. It's called Fossils for Kids, and it's just a really fantastic book. I would say kind of between the age 5 to 10 age range is a good one. That's I think one of the better ones out there. Another one that I think is really great is called She Finds Fossils, and that is cool because it highlights a lot of paleontologists from around the world and tells their personal stories, not just some of the early paleontologists, but paleontologists are around today. So Fossils for Kids and She Finds Fossils, I think, are two of my favorite.
Let's see. Next question is from Patrick Muffler. I know that Protoceratops existed in Mongolia. I found a skull. Show off.
Yeah.
But have Triceratops fossils been found there? In other words, did Laurentia extend to Asia?
Great question. Okay, so Triceratops itself is not found there, but there are North American style Triceratops cousins that are found there. And you find things very similar to T-Rex in that. So the thought is there probably was a land bridge, that reconnected um, that, back in the day and allowed, relatives of Triceratops, probably in the last few million years of the Cretaceous. And that's something that's only been known in the last 15 years or so. That's a very recent find. Just like, Triceratops in Mississippi, we didn't think of a horned dinosaur like Triceratops in China up until very recently.
This one's a great question from Dr. Dan Gluckstein. Would you get a Ceratopsian themed tattoo?
No. I
Oh,
love seeing them on my friends, but I'm not yet, not yet. I just haven't met the
maybe
right Ceratopsian, I guess.
maybe we can add that in the live auction. Andy gets a tattoo.
Yeah.
Let's see. This one's from Diana Pomeroy. Was there a split between the types of ceratopsians that wandered across the western interior seaway, or no?
I wish I knew. There's just not the fossils to tell yet. Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and I'm just hoping that George and everyone else out there is going to find that piece of skull that'll say what kind of ceratopsids were over there.
This one's actually from Doc. What about that new dinosaur species you found in a museum drawer in a museum in England?
Okay, yeah, I'll get that. I had thought about including that in the talk, but there's only so many hours in the day. So way back, this would have been in the early 2000s. I was over in London filming for a TV documentary, and had a part of a day to go to the Natural History Museum there. Opened up a drawer of some fossils that had been the museum had actually purchased back in the early 1900s. Turned out to be a new species of dinosaur that hadn't been recognized previously. So I worked with scientists there and some other ones to go ahead and name it, and that ended up as Spinops. Which is now also a plastic toy dinosaur that you can buy, apparently. So
I saw one at Target. I actually should pick it up.
Yeah.
Let's see. This one's from Robert Nixon. Did you find Triceratops relatives in your Madagascar studies?
Oh, I wish, but no. Triceratops and ceratopsians in general, as far as we know, never made it to the southern hemisphere.
This one is from Ron Ugolik. It must have been wild to meet up with persons that you communicated with as a child in grad school. Did any of them remember you from back in the day?
Yes, yeah, that was something fun. Like Kathy definitely, my PhD advisor, like she definitely remembered that. She made fun of me a little bit for being a little bit of a nerd, but we remembered that, and I think that's been something that's really cool. Is I've had continuous communication with some of these people I met that way, for decades, and some of them are now good friends and even research collaborators. So that's been, I think, really fun. It's been a really fun part of what I've done is having those relationships across now decades.
Let's see. This one is from Anonymous, actually.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite project you've worked on? Also, do you think that advances in genetic manipulation will provide further advances in paleontology? Or am I watching too much Jurassic Park?
Okay, yeah, that's the question I always get, and I think I don't think we're likely, as far as I know, to get enough dinosaur DNA to resurrect a Triceratops, but I think there are some neat genetic works going on right now, looking at modern birds where they can figure out, like, hey, what gene had to get turned on or off or modified, to get from a velociraptor to a chicken. So I think there's some really interesting stuff that's informing dinosaur evolution and bird evolution. Then as far as favorite discovery, I think every fossil, that's like such the word. It's like asking my favorite kid. I love all the fossils that I found. I remember, like some horse toe bones I found out at Barstow even. So I would say that, the unsatisfying answer is, every fossil.
Yumiko is asking, what was the function of horns?
Okay, yeah, another good question. Much like with the frill, that's something that's been a lot of debate. I think they were definitely used for defense, maybe for competing with each other. And that's, you know, and a little bit of everything. Just like horned animals today, you know, I think horned dinosaurs did a lot of different things.
Let's see. This one is from Jessica Jackson, actually from her 9-year-old son. Were dinosaurs on Earth longer than humans?
Yes, and in fact, you know, if you remember that birds today are, you know, dinosaurs. They're dinosaur descendants, so they are dinosaurs. You know, dinosaurs have basically a 230 or 240 million year track record on Earth. Um, and you know, humans have only been around, you know, basically in modern form for around, like, you know, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years. And one of the really mind-blowing pieces of trivia to think about, when you think about geological time and that time spiral, is that right now we are actually closer in time to T-Rex than T-Rex was to Stegosaurus. You know, where the amount of time separating us from T-Rex is only 66 million years only. And the amount of time separating T-Rex from Stegosaurus is like 70 or 80 million years. Stegosaurus lived that much further before T-Rex, you know, so geological time is just an amazing thing.
I love that fact. It's my favorite thing to utter when we do our events. This one's from Mark Wilson. Is there any evidence for Laramidia being divided north and south?
Oh, wow. That's another one of those, you know, controversial questions. So Laramidia, that western landmass of North America, it probably was at least geographically continuous, but there's some evidence that there might have been some minor barriers that would have, you know, made it difficult for animals to get north and south, maybe a big river system or something like that. But it was pretty minor. There is not a lot of, originally, you know, say 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of people thought that there were big barriers that might have separated them. That case is falling apart a little bit. So I think, you know, new evidence is showing they probably were mixing pretty well.
Let's see. Paige Thibodeau is asking, what is the latest from the scientific thinking on whether dinosaurs were ectotherms, endotherms, or mesotherms, i.e. cold-blooded, warm-blooded, or something in between?
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, so yes, I think that's, you know, in many ways the scientific consensus. It's not an area I really research, but in talking with people, it seems dinosaurs did what dinosaurs wanted to do, you know, and some of them probably had a very high metabolism. Some of them had a lower metabolism. But we do know, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, they were pretty active critters.
Let's see. This one's from Tony Can. Is it possible that the teeth found in Mississippi was eaten by a marine mammal and carried across the water and became a fossil there? Ooh.
Oh, yes. That was actually something we talked a lot about on this. In the end, we think that's probably not the case. I mean, partly because it's just really, really unlikely. The distance from Western North America at that time was actually, it would have been a couple hundred miles, which, you know, I don't think it's likely that a Triceratops would like survive that long to float that far, and then just happen to get the tooth, you know, eaten and digested and out the other side. And there's no evidence of things like digestive, you know, damage to that tooth either. So, you know, it's something we thought about. Maybe it was like a Triceratops that bloated and floated those, you know, hundreds of miles. But it's just so close to shore at that point that George's opinion on what the currents were like in the area at the time was that it's probably coming from not that far away.
Daniel Hernandez is asking, what advice can you give to elementary school students who are interested in becoming a paleontologist?
Oh, fantastic. Nice to hear from you, Daniel. There's so many, you know, again, I could talk for hours on this. I think for elementary students, you know, at that point, just like, you know, keep up your interests, you know, read as much as you can. You know, if you're in an area where you can go to museums, you know, go to those museums. If there's opportunities to meet scientists, you know, meet those scientists. But I think a lot of it is, you know, just working on, you know, developing yourself as a thinker, you know, learning like what's good information, what's, you know, less good information, what's speculation, what's not. And, you know, just seeking out, you know, good books, whether from the library or online or wherever. I think that's a really good place to start. But I think, you know, if you're in an area where you have the opportunity to go to museums, you know, getting to see those things in person, I think is just so cool.
Mr. Larry Ashton himself is asking, What is the record number of horns for ceratopsid skulls? What makes the number significant?
Oh, wow. And that actually meshes really well with the question from Ellen Goldman, too, about how many horns have been found on a dinosaur. So I'll cover both of those at once. I don't actually know off the top of my head. I'm a bad paleontologist. I know with Cosmoceratops, it has something like 10 horns across the back of the frill and another 2 over the eyes. And so I think, probably in the 15 to 20 range would be our record. And it's significant because you can use the numbers and the shapes of those horns to tell species apart.
All right, here are our last 3 questions, everybody.
All right.
This one's from Sebastian Hazlitt. Are there any other known instances of divergent evolution between dinosaurs besides ceratopsids on either side of the western interior seaway?
Oh, fantastic question. So unfortunately, the fossil record out east is not that well known. But what is known from rocks of around the right age is that they have relatives of the groups, some distant relatives, that are kind of like, I wouldn't say frozen in time, but they're sort of like, they're relics of what was in across all of North America around 90 million years ago. So they're like the ones that just kind of, were stuck out on the east side. So there's hadrosaurs, but they're not like the hadrosaurs from Western North America. They're sort of a quote unquote more primitive variety. There's tyrannosaurs, but they're more primitive than Tyrannosaurus rex and those true ones. Yeah, so there definitely is a split happening there. But there's, we just don't know a lot because the fossils are pretty scarce.
This one's from Steve Satig. Wait, isn't there a beer named after a Quillops?
Oh yeah, so yeah, that little horned dinosaur that I helped name. Yeah, I'm a home brewer. I make my own beer at home, and so sometimes I'll name my batches after particular dinosaurs. And I did have something called Eagle Face Oatmeal Stout, because that's what the name of Quillops means, Eagle Face. And that actually got published along with a little short article in Zymergy magazine, which is a magazine for home brewing enthusiasts. So trying to get my science education out there everywhere, whether it takes Zoom presentations or beer, I'll make sure people know about dinosaurs.
Let's see, 2 more questions and then we're finish up here. This one's from Dan Gluckstein. What mid-Cretaceous Appalachia dinosaurs are described in Laramidia?
Really none, or there's just not enough things that match up, from east and west to really allow us to know what's happening. We know like they're sort of closely related, but yeah, it's just hard to tell. It's an area there's so much research that can be done there, I think.
And our last question comes from volunteer Stephen. What is your opinion regarding the recent paper that ceratopsians were partially feathered, and what would be their function if this is true?
Oh, cool. Yes, the eternal question. What was on ceratopsian skin? So it seems that at least some, especially the early psittacosaurs, had quills or quill-like things. Whether or not Triceratops had that is debated because we don't have fossils of quite the high enough quality preservation. There's been some suggestions that they might have had fuzz or something like that. I think it's quite possible because we know that early plant-eating dinosaurs, early ornithischians, were fuzzy. They were probably kind of cute and fuzzy, even if they would bite your finger off. So I think it's possible that maybe, fuzz was retained later on into, maybe for very young Triceratops, maybe they had a little bit of, fuzz here and there, kind of like a baby pig. They don't have a lot of fur, but they have that little bit of hair here and there. Yeah, so I think that's an open question. We just need a lot more fossils to really figure out what that skin looked like. That's a great question. Thanks, Stephen.
All right. Well, that does it for our questions. It's time to wrap up here. Let me get this up really quick. So yeah, once again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you again to Dr. Farke for giving us that wonderful story about his life with Triceratops and also those amazing photos. Again, I'm going to try to get those from you. So just to reiterate, the Moment of Time speaker series was created to honor Dr. Raymond Alf, who was a scientist, teacher, and an amazing storyteller at the Alf Museum. He started this fantastic tradition of teaching science through stories. And like I said, today we continue that tradition. We have really worked hard to become this world-class educational resource And all of our unique and innovative storytelling programs reach audiences worldwide, from here in Southern California to far off places like Mongolia and Madagascar, and anywhere that we can get our educational resources to. And during this time, we're doing as much as we can to provide these at no cost to communities that really need them. And the reason we're able to do this is thanks to all of you and your support. It's thanks to the support from the web community that we are able to provide this series and educational programs like it to students and audiences worldwide. So if you would like to continue to support education at the ALF Museum, you can give a gift online at www.web.org/giving and designate the ALF Museum. And some things coming up that you might be interested in is on August 28th, there's a virtual concert, Unwind with Web. Registration info is on the alumni events page. Ben Davis from 2011 is performing. And next month is our next Moment of Time speaker, Dr. Don Lofgren, who will be talking about investigating California's tropical past with Malcolm McKenna, Year 48, and the Goler Club. So please look out for that registration, and we hope to see you all on the next one. Thanks, everybody.